I think we're going to be tested very, very soon with the events that I see taking place, not so much in the world, although those are warnings, but what is taking place in the church is telling me that a crisis is just ahead of us. And the only hope we have is to really believe with all of our hearts all the inspired writings, both the Bible and the writings of Ellen White. And so tonight I want to talk to you about what is the last deception, the one that's going to take place just before Jesus comes. And what are the causes of this deception? Why do people get tripped up with this deception? We begin in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1. It says, "There shall be false teachers among you, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies." Now, the word teacher and the word prophet are used somewhat interchangeably, although it's probably not 100% interchangeable. So we're going to have false prophets, and we're going to have those who claim to have a message from Jesus, and they're going to bring in, it says, damnable heresies. And here's what ends up happening, Ephesians 4:14, that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. What did God do to keep us from being blown about with every wind of doctrine? He sent prophets to help us. And God knew that the worst deceptions, the most deceptions, would occur just before Jesus came. And so he raised up Ellen White to be a protection to us. Now, there are various illustrations that are used, and some of them are partially helpful, and some are very helpful. But I'm going to share one that I believe it was Uriah Smith that shared this. He said that the Bible was like a great ocean liner that's coming from, say, Europe or Africa, and it's coming to the United States. But when it reaches the harbor, the captain of that vessel does not think he can bring it in to harbor. Instead, there's a harbor captain that gets in, and he directs that ship to the harbor. And he likens that to the relationship of the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. Now, unfortunately, Uriah Smith, during a portion of his life, was undermining the ministry of Ellen White and hurting a lot of people and damaging himself. And I don't know that the damage was ever undone fully, but at least he himself became a supporter of Ellen White later on, after that period. So that's quite helpful. That shows to me that we have to study a lot the writings of Ellen White. We can't say, well, I'm just going to study the Bible, because we're no longer out there in the ocean. We're close to the harbor, and we've got to know those details of that harbor in order to get there safely. But it says that her writings would be made of none effect. Second Selected Messages, page 78. The very last deception of Satan will be to make of none effect the testimony of the Spirit of God. And in the context, it's saying the testimony that was given to Ellen White. At the very last deception, now the Bible is under attack as well in the Adventist Church to some degree, but no, not like her writings are under attack. Nowhere near that. And so this is the last deception. Where there is no vision, the people perish. We could read that, where there's no prophet, the people perish, because they don't know the way. They can't discern the way they're supposed to go. That's way back in the Old Testament when it says that. Proverbs 29:18. Satan will work ingeniously. Notice he's had 6,000 years to polish his attacks. And so the word used here is ingenious. He's going to work in the last days in a very ingenious way, in different ways, and through different agencies. So there's going to be more than one attack. And there's going to be more than one entity that mounts an attack upon these writings in different ways and through different agencies to unsettle the confidence of God's remnant people in the true testimony. So that's what he's after, us. He, of course, wants to tempt everybody, but he's especially after Adventists because we are the remnant people of God. Now here's some of the ways that it tells us he will work. He will bring in spurious visions to mislead and will mingle the false with the true and so disgust people that they will regard everything that bears the name of visions as a species of fanaticism. But honest souls, by contrasting false and true, will be enabled to distinguish between them. So honest-hearted people that really want to know, the Holy Spirit won't let them be deceived. And as they compare what this prophet is saying, they're going to discover whether it agrees with the Bible or not. And if it doesn't agree, they turn away. But they don't throw out all prophets. Instead, they check. And when they find a true prophet, then they cling to that one, which Ellen White has been proved over and over again by those who care to do it. It has been proved that she is a true prophet, without question. So, we must not allow all the false prophets. And again, you know, the word teacher and the word prophet are a little bit intermingled because in the Old Testament, they called the religious teachers prophets even if they didn't have visions and dreams. And so that means we will get attacks from pastors. They don't claim to be a prophet, but they do claim to be able to teach God's people. We will get attacks from all kinds of sources to try to undermine the writings of Ellen White. It will get so bad that in First Selected Messages, page 48, it says, there will be a hatred kindled against the testimonies, which is satanic. So it's not enough just to say, well, we don't think that's valid. We see here that the animosity toward what God has revealed through Ellen White actually becomes a hatred in many people's hearts. And so, you know, a Christian or a so-called Christian knows better than to obviously show their hatred against Ellen White's writings. But God looks at the heart. And he says, these people hate the writings of Ellen White. And they go about in sneaky ways to try to undermine people's confidence because they hate them down deep in their heart. Now, some people blast her. There are some former pastors that, for whatever reason, became unhappy with their writings, and they're doing their best to condemn and present reasons why we shouldn't believe her writings. And truly, they hate it openly. They do. The workings of Satan will be to unsettle the faith of the churches in them. Now, let me just mention one way that I think it is getting unsettled. If you use much of Ellen White's writings in the pulpit, you will soon be in trouble. You will be attacked in regard to your bad practice. Now, of course, if there are non-Adventists that are coming regularly to church, then I think we need to be pretty careful, because it's not fair to accept a non-Adventist who thinks she's a prophet when they haven't heard the evidence. So it's not that we're afraid to present it, it's just not time for them to be exposed to that. And I'll have to say this, we need to be careful in Sabbath school class too, because I've heard things said in Sabbath school class that would drive away a non-Adventist, because we're saying that she's inspired. And they don't have the evidence yet that she is inspired. So, we do have to consider who's there, but if essentially we have Adventists that are there, the idea is we still shouldn't use it. We can use Shakespeare, we can use Spurgeon, we can use all kinds of people, we can quote from them, but we're not supposed to quote from Ellen White. Something's wrong in that picture. The members have had this unsettling of their faith in these writings. For this reason, why does Satan want this to happen? Satan cannot have so clear a track to bring in his deceptions and bind up souls in his delusions if the warnings and reproofs and counsels of the Spirit of God are heeded. So Satan hates the testimonies because he can fool people on the Bible pretty easily, but when it comes to the writings of Ellen White, he has a hard time because it's so clear and so plain. And so he hates those writings, and he wants to get us to lose confidence in them so that he can work more freely. Now, there is a between the lines message there as well, and that is that we need the writings that were given to Ellen White in order to discern all the delusions for the last days. We can't say we don't need it. We're going to just study our Bible. We don't need this information, because if we say that, then we're going to be tripped up on some of the deceptions that are being presented. And they're not all future, by the way. There are a lot of deceptions that are already out there, already going through many churches and many people's viewpoints, even professors of religion and so on. There are deceptions out there that the enemy has been working on for a long time. And the way that we tell is through the writings given to Ellen White. In First Selected Messages, page 41, it says, soon. Now that was written a long time ago. Soon, every possible effort will be made to discount and pervert the truth of the testimonies of God's Spirit. It's interesting, the two words that are used. Those there will be people who will teach using the writings of Ellen White, but they will pervert it. And if we're not careful, because we hear them quoting from Ellen White, we think it's okay. But they use it in the wrong way. So that's one danger that it said would take place. The other one is that it would be discounted. Now, Adventists really love discounts, I've noticed. If you have a big enough discount, we will buy things we don't even need. You know, if it's 70% off, boy, we're down there to get that. And I don't like long lines, so many times when there's these big discounts, I don't even go there because I don't like fighting the crowd to get the thing that they're selling so cheap. But when it comes to the use of the spirit of prophecy, it becomes very dangerous. And if we say that 20% of her writings are not true, which 20%? And how are we going to evaluate which 20% is not true? But I'm fearful that it's much worse than that. It's more like 50% or 70%. The ones that are fairly broadly accepted, it seems, although I don't think they accept everything in the books, but Desire of Ages, Conflict of the Ages series, we would find very broad support for those books. At least they believe they support them. But I've noticed there's a lot of reforms in those books, and I don't think they follow that. So even some of those is discounted in their mind. And when they read that part of it, they just kind of go right over it, and they don't think it's anything they need to do. But then when we start getting to books like The Adventist Home, Child Guidance, Counsels on Diets and Foods, True Education, or the book Education. You know, I had an interesting experience when I was in college. I had a class using the book Education as a textbook. And later, I came to Wildwood, and I had a class on True Education. And as I was taking the class, I started thinking, how can both classes be taught out of the same book? It's nowhere near. It's like at opposite poles. But yet both are claiming that they're teaching what the book Education says. Well, I finally could see pretty clearly that the one I got in school was not correct, but the one I got at Wildwood was correct. So the discount is getting very large, and it's extremely dangerous because if myself, as an uninspired person, can decide what is inspired and what isn't in a prophet, you know, that's putting me above the prophet. And so I don't care how many degrees somebody has. If they think they can do that, they are elevating themselves above the prophet. We do have the privilege and the responsibility to determine whether a prophet is a prophet or not using certain guidelines. But once we see they are a prophet, we're not at liberty to cut and choose. You know, it's known now as cut and paste. But we're not at liberty to do that. Here's one written to G.I. Butler, who was a General Conference president. And it's in the 1888 materials, page 194. I tell you, the work God has given me to do has not suffered and is not likely to suffer half as much from open opposers as from my apparent friends, those who appear to be defenders of the testimonies, but are their real assailants, who weaken them and make them of none effect. So when we have somebody that openly hates Ellen White's writings, they're not going to do a lot of damage to us, anyway. I mean, you can't listen to their arguments and get damaged if you pore over their arguments, but we tend to brace ourselves against that kind of person. But when a fellow Adventist comes who quotes the Spirit of Prophecy like G.I. Butler did, and he says things that undermine her writings, that has a much more damaging effect upon us. And that's why she says that the most damage of her ministry was from those that were her apparent friends. Those who said, Ellen White, yeah, she's a prophet. Yes, she's a wonderful blessing to the church. But instead, they pull some of the pins out from underneath the information that was given. Here's one that is often done, Third Selected Messages, page 68. If the preconceived opinions or particular ideas of some are crossed in being reproved by testimonies, they have a burden at once to make plain their position, to discriminate between the testimonies, defining what is Sister White's human judgment and what is the word of the Lord. Everything that sustains their cherished ideas is divine, and the testimonies to correct their errors are human. Sister White's opinions. They make of none effect the counsel of God by their tradition. So here we have to be careful. And it's not just the people out there, it's right here. Perhaps you've heard the story of Sutherland. Sutherland was one of the greatest supporters of Ellen White. He was determined to put on a demonstration of the book Education, and he studied it, and he put it into practice. He plowed up the ball field and put a garden in there in one school, and he was determined. But when God revealed to Ellen White that they were to buy the property that later became Madison, he didn't want to do it. He felt the prophet was making a mistake. He looked at the land and it looked horrible to him, and he just didn't want to buy that land. But Ellen White kept pushing him, and he went to look at it, and all of a sudden the Holy Spirit opened up his mind, and he said, I had a problem up there in Michigan because the brethren didn't want to listen to what Ellen White said. And here I am doing the same thing. And so he changed his mind, and he decided to help buy the property instead of fighting against what the prophet had said. So, all of us face that danger. When we're reading and we find something that says what we said previously is wrong, what are we going to do? We have to be willing to accept what it says, confess the fact that we said it wrong before, and follow what the inspired writer says. Because if we don't do that, then we start doing exactly what this tells us is going to happen. Also in First Selected Messages, page 48, it says, some who are not willing to receive the light, but who prefer to walk in ways of their own choosing. And here we have kind of what we call an independent person. They like, I have one, thank you. They like to teach what they want to teach and what they want to believe. Says they're not willing to receive the light, but they prefer to walk in ways of their own choosing. Here's what they do. They will search the testimonies to find something in them to encourage the spirit of unbelief and disobedience. Now, we know that people do that with the Bible, don't they? And so, Seventh-day Adventists can do with the writings of Ellen White the same thing that other people do with the Bible. And there's also a prophecy that if we do that, if we start finding fault with her writings and backing away from her writings, guess what? The next step is to do the same with the Bible. So it's very dangerous. Thus, a spirit of disunion will be brought in, for the spirit which leads them to criticize the testimonies will also lead them to watch their brethren to find in them something to condemn. So this is a habit that shows itself in more than one way. And it divides us as people from each other, as well as dividing them from the inspired writings. So, the thing that is supposed to unite us as a people is the Bible and spirit of prophecy. If we don't put our own interpretation, but we allow the inspired writings to interpret themselves, we, as Seventh-day Adventists, would be in perfect unity with one another. Now, what happens in a disagreement? Somebody is misunderstanding something. And so we have to study more. But if we will both study, both sides, if they will study, they will discover references that will unite them. And this is what we need to do. Instead of condemning each other and fighting each other, we need to be doing more study until we discover those statements that will unite. So just quickly review on what reasons we have that people reject. Well, number one is because of the many false prophets that are out there. Also, we see it's Satan's activity. He is busy creating a hatred against these writings. Third, we find that some claim that there's a lack of inspiration, at least in some of what she wrote. Now, it is true that not every word she ever wrote is inspired. You know, we have diary entries, we have letters to her children, and letters to other leaders of the church, and she does not claim that every word she ever wrote is inspired. But from my examination, it's not too hard to tell the difference between the two, if you're willing, to do that. Number 4, some people are going to arise and say it's not all valid today. Now let me mention a concept that applies to the Bible, but I believe it also applies to her writings. We're told that this is in 1 Corinthians 10:11. We're told that all of the prophets wrote examples, ensamples is the word the King James uses, for those upon whom the ends of the world would come, which means that they wrote specifically for the last generation. That's true of Moses. That's true of Malachi. That's true of Revelation. Of course, that one's easy to see. But all of the Bible writers wrote the things that would belong to the last days. Now, the popular view is that that's not true of Ellen White. That she did not write for the last days, that she wrote for her day. And so some of what she wrote for that day does not apply for today. But she says different. So either she's a liar or she's a prophet. She says that her writings are for the last days. And so we cannot afford to get rid of these things. Now, of course, there are situations in which the circumstances have changed and what was being done back then is not being done now. And so there are a few things of that nature, but I don't think, from what I've looked at, there's very much of that. I mean, that's not a very big problem to contend with. Number 5, some will twist the meaning. And sad to say, they are the ones who claim they're her friends and that they're trying to support and uphold the ministry of Ellen White, but they're twisting what she says. And 6, some look for supposed mistakes. So they're always digging to try to find something. But I've noticed this. Whatever you can find that looks wrong in the writings of Ellen White, you can find the same problem in the Bible. Same problem. Let's take one that trips up a lot of people. On one occasion, Ellen White said that some standing there would see Jesus come. Well, of course, nobody that was standing there is still alive. Too much time has gone by. And so people start thinking, oh, she's a false prophet because she said that would happen. But those same problems exist in the Bible. And what we have to understand is that when a prophecy is given that depends on what people do, it's called a conditional prophecy because it depends on what they do. God said to Israel, I'll never forsake you. You'll be my people forever. Did he forsake them? Yes. Because over and over again, and finally they filled up their 490 years of probation, the last probation, and he had to turn away from them. So it looks like the Bible promise didn't get fulfilled. So if people obey, they get the promise. If they disobey, they don't get the promise. If we look at when could Jesus have come, it starts around 1856. That Jesus could have come by 1856. If he had come by 1856, the prophecy would have worked out exactly as it was given. But by 1901, God told Ellen White, we're going to have to stay in this world many more years because of insubordination. So I do believe there will be a time when he has to cut it short regardless of insubordination. But he has allowed it to go on a long time due to insubordination. And the last one we noticed was some feel hurt by correction. And one of the ones that really felt hurt, in fact, he came in, he supported Ellen White, then he got corrected, he went out and fought Ellen White, he came back in and promoted Ellen White, promoted her again, and then he went out again and he stayed out. His name was D.M. Kenwright. And I've been told, I haven't examined all this, but I've been told that those who criticize Ellen White today have not come up with any new arguments that Ken Wright didn't have already. So they're not very creative. They just want to blast her, and he gave them the ammunition to do it. Now in a few minutes, I might not finish this section, but we'll cover what we can. Reasons people reject or fail to benefit from Ellen White's writings. Here's one of the main objections to her writings. First Selected Messages, page 45. Those who have most to say against the testimonies are generally those who have not read them. So, people hear this and they hear that, and they think this and they think that. They haven't really researched her writings, and they go off condemning this part or that part or maybe the whole of her writings. But is that really fair? They haven't read them. And so, at least before they try to do that, they should read. The second one, in First Selected Messages, page 45, says, when you find men questioning the testimonies, finding fault with them, and seeking to draw away the people from their influence, be assured that God is not at work through them. It is another spirit. Now, one thing I have noticed as I have read very largely in her writings, I haven't read every word that she wrote, but I find this kind of statement again and again. She says, be assured God is not at work through them. Now, she's either a very boastful person or she is telling what God tells her. And she knows that the message that she's giving us is from God. And she can make those kind of statements over and over and over again. It's another spirit, she says. It's the devil's spirit, really. First Selected Messages, 47. Did not God reprove this phase in your character by the testimonies years ago? He will answer, yes, I received a written testimony saying that I was wrong in these things. Why then did you not correct these wrong habits? Here's his answer. I thought the reprover must have made a mistake. That which I could see, I accepted. That which I could not see, I said, was the mind of one who gave the message. I did not accept the reproof. Now, I hope no one here reads either the Bible or the writings of Ellen White that way, because that is a very dangerous way. If we read it and we think that something is not needed, that's perhaps the very thing we do need to receive from the Lord's instruction. First Selected Messages, 19. The minds of different education and thought receive different impressions of the same words. And it is difficult for one mind to give to one of a different temperament, education, and habits of thought by language exactly the same idea as that which is clear and distinct in his own mind. So if somebody who has a different temperament, different education, habit of thinking, reads the inspired writings, they are in danger of twisting it or thinking it doesn't apply. But if we are submissive to what it says, or we are willing to examine carefully, what is it really telling us? and looking in other places for other statements on the same point, we can discover the truth about it instead of arguing against it or not choosing to follow it. The problem is us, not the author. You see, we have a tendency to feel the author is the problem, but it's better for us to think we're the problem, because that's probably more likely that we're the problem. Then it says, yet to honest men, right-minded men, he can be so simple and plain as to convey his meaning for all practical purposes. So, Ellen White does try to present everything simple. Some people think it's not too simple because there are some words that are not commonly used today. But in general, her writings are very simple. I have been reading the Bible and Spirit of Prophecy for many years. I have not been reading theological works. But once in a while when I try to do it, I don't even understand what they're talking about. I'm so used to simple language, plain speech, that I have trouble with the other. And that's an asset apparently, because if we're honest-hearted and the person speaks in simple language, we should be able to get the message clearly. If the man he communicates with is not honest and will not want to see and understand the truth, he will turn his words and language in everything to suit his own purposes. So a dishonest person reading the Spirit of Prophecy is going to end up twisting some of it. He will misconstrue his words, play upon his imagination, wrest them from their true meaning, and then entrench himself in unbelief, claiming that the sentiments are all wrong. So he sabotages himself because of the way he's looking at it. He is trying to find something wrong, and he turns things in a different direction of what they were intended, and he comes up with thinking she's a problem. First Selected Messages, page 20. Prepossessions, prejudices, and passions have a strong influence to darken the understanding and confuse the mind, even in reading the words of Holy Writ. So even in the Bible, that problem exists. If we have an idea that's false and it's in our mind, sometimes we cast reflection on Sunday keepers, and I don't think we should do that. They read the Bible with a prepossession or with a prejudice, and they don't see that the seventh day is the Sabbath. That can happen in all kinds of topics. And so that's why we are to go and, magnify the truth and make it plain and help them to see and get past their wrong understanding. I think we'll finish with this one. First Selected Messages, 72. Self-will and pride of opinion lead many to reject the light from heaven. I think this is especially predominant among leadership. Why would it be especially predominant there? Because leaders are teaching what they believe. So if they've already taught error and they discover that they taught error, it's hard for them to admit that they taught error. And they don't want to have to go back and say, well, I'm sorry, what I told you was not correct. And for that reason, it's hard to change those that are leaders sometimes. Not all, praise the Lord, but many that are leaders, they don't want to admit that they misunderstood something. They cling to pet ideas, fanciful interpretations of Scripture, and dangerous heresies. And if a testimony is born to correct these errors, they will, like many in Christ's day, go away displeased. Now, hidden in there is another claim. Many say it's wrong to allow Ellen White's writings to help us understand the Bible correctly. But you'll notice it's hidden in there. This person was misunderstanding the Bible. A testimony came from Ellen White to correct those errors, but they went away displeased. So that reference is making it plain that one of the purposes of her writings is to get rid of the misunderstandings of the Bible. Now, her writings agree with the Bible, but if a person has a misunderstanding of the Bible and they compare that with Ellen White's writings, they're going to think her writings were wrong instead of admitting that they're wrong about the way they understand the Bible. So this is dangerous. It's the same when Jesus came to this earth. He bothered a lot of people because he didn't teach the Bible the same way that they were teaching the Bible. And that happens over and over again in the history of the world. And unfortunately, it has happened in our day and has been really going on for a long time.